The Emrald Elite, also referred to by some of the more brave Imperial commoners as the Imperial War, is a military-dictated collective of Orks in the Segmentum Obscurus, established in the year 922 of M41, who lay claim to protect Imperial worlds from other Ork forces, Chaos invasions, Dark Eldar raiders, and on 2 occasions against Tyrannid infestations of 2 agri-worlds and any other form of threat that may come to humans that inhabit the planets within the Elite's self-proclaimed jurisdiction. The reason for this comes from the leader of the collective, Boss Admiral Gemra Manza Jawsmasher. However, before taking on that title, he was known as Mason Jonsophan, an Imperial Guard commissar of noble stock. During a campaign where he was assigned to lead forces to reclaim a planet from Orkish occupation, he was captured along with several guardsmen and left in the care of the local war boss's favourite painboy, Zaturn the Imaginative. During Mason's period of capture, Zaturn was given the limp body of one of the war boss's favourite nobs, who had received a severe head injury, even by Orc standards, with the instruction to fix him. Feeling particularly inspired that day, Zaturn, along with his Gretchen helpers, performed an operation where, despite his great protest and struggling, they transplanted Mason's brain into the nob's body. The process would have normally been impossible, but thanks to the Greenskins' influence of the laws of reality through their sheer belief, the transplant was a success, and Mason eventually awoke within a cage. Speaking had become somewhat difficult, as the speech he knew how to use was not very well suited for his new mouth and vocal cords. For days he was subjected to other experiments by Zaturn, until a force of Adeptus Astartes from an unknown chapter made their way into the encampment, where the lab of the Painboy was located. Running away during the panic, the Gretchen left to watch over the Doc's pet project forgot to properly lock Mason up, so he managed to free himself and escaped into the planet's wilderness, knowing full well that if any Imperial were to see him, they would see nothing but a Xenos in need of exterminating. For days he wandered lost, feeling hatred for himself because he allowed his humanity to be taken away from him, thinking how he had disappointed and turned into a disgrace in the eyes of the Emperor. That was until one day a regular Orc boy by the name of Ragtar came upon him. Seeing his distraught state, the small Orc thought he had found an easy win over a bigger opponent, but using both his combat training and bigger size, Mason overpowered the Orc, who then began following and acknowledging him as his new boss. It was then when an idea came into Mason's mind of how to turn the course that had befallen him into a means of helping the Imperium, and hopefully redeeming himself in the eyes of the Emperor. Doing his best to mimic Ragtar's speech, as well as that of the Orcs and Gretchen he had listened to during his captivity, Mason, who now decided to call himself Manza, in order to better mingle with the other Orcs, as he and his new underling went around subjugating other Greenskins, until the former commissar had made himself an entourage big enough to take over one of the last remaining Orc ships and escape the planet, while the Imperial forces were distracted by the other surviving nobs who tried to play boss like him. In the following years, Manza's new Emrald Elite, as he named his warband, raided other small spacefaring Orc forces, and grew in numbers, before finally settling on the moon of the planet Unzatrak, deep within the Segmentum Obscurus. There, Manza began building a force mimicking the structure of the Imperial Guard. A brutal hierarchy was established, in which the newly spawned Orc boys and Gretchen were immediately indoctrinated by their superiors. Unlike normal Orc society, simply growing is not enough to advance in social stature within the Emrald Elite. In order to rise, an Orc or Gretchen needs to prove that he has the skills and capabilities for it, as to not lose them from the other veterans, since most promotions happen in vicious one-on-one duels to the death. Because of that, an abnormal amount of Greenskins with an above average intelligence for the species as a whole could be found within the Elite's ranks as commanding figures. Another of the most notable abnormalities they display, unlike other Orcs, is that the older, more experienced Greenskins actually teach the younger ones how to improve their own fighting prowess and tactical capability. The reason for this is Manza's greatest accomplishment, convincing his entire force that the twin deities of the Orcs, Gork and Mork, are in fact a single being, namely, the Emperor. In all of his years as a boss, Manza has beaten into the heads of his subordinates that the Emperor is the one who made the Orcs, and after they die, they go to him and he judges whether they are skilled enough to join him into the greatest never-ending fight possible. And in order for them to become skilled, they need to fight ever better opponents, and who better than someone you train personally. That is why the Orcs of the collective become so eager to both study and teach others of their kin. To achieve this, Manza beat this notion into the heads of his biggest subordinates, who in turn did it to those beneath them, and so on and so forth, until newly birthed Greenskins get it beaten into their heads from the moment they are born. Another thing Mansa had beaten into the minds of his boys was that the Emperor made the Umis, who were boringly weak, in order to lure in the strongest and most vicious enemies in the cosmos, since they would otherwise run away from the Orks. And the reason as to why he made the Space Marines is for them to protect the Umis, while the Orks are having themselves a great scrap. This mentality, combined with Mansa's claim that they are the owners of surrounding space, is why these Orks actually want to get between anything that seeks to harm Imperial citizens and its targets. They are in essence protecting their property.